sorry.
Oh, we've already had that, actually. So we've got that bylaw 2019-06 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council of Norfolk County at the special council meeting held on the 8th of January 2019 be passed, signed by the mayor and county clerk, and affixed with our corporate seal. It's been moved by Ian Rabbits and Councillor Rabbits and seconded by Councillor Geisens. All in favor? And that's carried. Council is adjourned. I don't want to miss this.
We haven't. I think we're just switching the seats.
Yeah,
Are they taking?
I don't think we're taking a break.
Oh, right. Forgot, that's right. This is council.
Just going. Oh, we are doing 10 minutes.
Good afternoon again, and welcome to the 2019 Rate and Capital Budget Meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised. For those in attendance, I would ask that you ensure your phones are on silence mode. We must recess by 5 p.m. today to commence the January 8th Council and Committee meeting. Business not completed by the time of recess today will be dealt with commencing at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, January the 9th. Budget meetings are always a little less formal than regular council meetings, so historically we have not required members to stand when speaking. If there are concerns with this informality, I'd be happy to entertain them now. We will, however, be requiring a mover and seconder for each motion presented. First, we'll start off, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Taylor, and seconded by Councillor Michelli. All in favor? Opposed? That's scary. The first presentation we have is going to be the staff report for the proposed 2019 rate-supported operating budget. But before we begin, I would like to make a couple of remarks. Today we will deal with our very first budget as a new council, the rate-supported budget. Tomorrow we anticipate hearing the capital, and the week after next the operating budget. My understanding is that traditionally the mayor prepares budget remarks in advance of the first budget meeting. I do intend to do something a little bit different in that each budget is different, and since we will be dealing with each in turn, so too will my remarks. First up today is the rate-supported operating budget, as I've described, and while I think it goes without saying, I do believe that it bears repeating for everyone, including our residents. Money doesn't grow on trees, and water doesn't fall from the clouds and into our taps. Funding for essential water services, source protection, and infrastructure investment has virtually dried up at the provincial and federal levels, so municipalities are left holding the bag now more than ever. Norfolk is not unique in this regard. However, while we do have to charge our residents for water usage, for source protection, for infrastructure investments, and for sanitation services, we can never forget that there is also an inherent human right to those services, and it is our duty as a municipality to keep those services affordable to all of our residents. On page 3-1, you will see a chart depicting performance measures of water and waste. Isn't it ironic that year after year we are actually seeing a decrease in water used as we encourage water conservation practices, yet we are continuously being charged more and more? Are water conservation and savings a false dichotomy? That's a question I keep asking myself. The rate-supported budget affects mainly those who are on municipal water and wastewater systems. However, there is a component that affects almost every home, cottage, boat, or trailer owner in Norfolk. Having that appreciation and listening to the comments of some of those who are affected, our residents, we, as council, must find some balance, yet also do what is right for Norfolk. We must balance the need for operating, maintaining, expanding, and replacing infrastructure with the capacity of people to pay, and that has a wide spectrum of ability. We cannot ignore the fixed costs we have inherited from previous councils and look to how we can mitigate and alter those costs. There surely are short-term and long-term solutions that we need to assess. Councillors, this is our first real opportunity to clearly demonstrate to our constituents that we can be and are different from all previous councils. We were elected on a platform of change, and it is time to show that it is not business as usual. We have time, we have lots of time, and while approving a budget early is nice, it is not a requirement. Do not feel pressured to approve this budget today or tomorrow even, and if more work needs to be done, so be it. This is what you were elected to do. I would like to offer my personal thanks to the county manager, the senior leadership team, all managers, supervisors, and employees for working diligently and with focus to prepare these budgets. The proposed budget now is council's budget. Our budget and our challenge is to ensure that the recommended spending is acceptable and serves the needs of the citizens of Norfolk. With that, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Johnson to present Report FS 19-01, the proposed 2019 rate-supported operating budget.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Here we are at our 2019 rate-supported budget, and to the right of me, I have Kathy LaPlante. She is the Manager of Financial Planning and Reporting and is the champion of this budget that we're presenting to you today, and she will be doing most of the talking, thankfully. To the left of me, I have Sue Bugner, who is the tax collector and manager of revenue services, who will be speaking on a couple slides related to the billing and the collection of the revenues needed to support the water and wastewater services that we have for Norfolk County. As well, I have Catherine Fanning, sort of behind me. She has been helping out both the Finance Division and the Public Works Division in pulling together the numbers before you today. I'd also like to thank Chris Baird across the room, as well as Stephanie Davis. Without the two of them, we wouldn't be able to get this budget together. If there's any operational questions, those would be the staff to ask. If there's any financial questions, of course, we're here to answer those. The water and wastewater or rate budget, it's a self-funded utility. The 18 or so million dollars that we need in order to provide the services is collected through what we call the ratepayers, and they are metered to determine their billing, and at a very high level, their billing is about 50% based on the water they use, and 50% is a fixed monthly rate. With the last rate study, it was determined that of the expenses for water and wastewater treatment, about 50% of them are fixed. So that means whether you produce 1 cubic meter of water or 3 million cubic meters of water, there's still going to be a $9 to $10 million expense to the county. As a reminder, I'm sure all of you know the tragedy that happened in Walkerton, Ontario in May of 2000. As a result of that tragedy, there were fatalities, and also there was 93 recommendations made by the province at that time in order to have stronger enforcement of the water regulations, more training for water and wastewater operators, as well as numerous other items, which unfortunately for the municipality, it all comes at a cost. The other challenge that Norfolk County has is the general geography where we live. We have approximately 15,000 users of our water and wastewater system. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, there's a lot of space that we have here in Norfolk County. We have one of the least dense users per square kilometer for billing of water and wastewater. At some point, I encourage all of you to look at the very last appendix in your budget package. There's a really good comparator there with other municipalities, and it really shows the uniqueness of Norfolk County in the density that we do not have to help pay for the expenses related to water and wastewater treatment. For example, we have 5 wastewater treatment facilities in the county, and we have at least 7 water treatment facilities to various degrees. There's other municipalities that only have 1 or 2. So that is also a challenge that Norfolk County has. So as a result of those challenges, even though we're not the highest in rates with our neighbors, we can't say that we're the lowest either. And that is a result of of the challenges that I just mentioned as far as the geography that we live in, as well as the numerous facilities that we have in order to treat our water and wastewater. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy LaPlante, and she will start our PowerPoint presentation. And within that presentation, there is a lot of information, and I believe we're encouraging questions as we go. So feel free to ask at any point. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. We apologize for not having the presentation on your screens in front of you. I understand we're having some technical problems related to that. So hopefully you have a printed copy also that you could follow through, and we do have it up on the screen here. Through the comments made by Mayor Chop and Mr. Johnson, there will be some repeating of some information within the slides. So you will hear a couple things probably reiterated a couple times. And again, this presentation is informal, and if you have any questions, please feel free to stop us, and we can hopefully, between Public Works and the rest of the senior management team, we can answer your questions. So just to get started, today is still having more technical problems. Sorry. So as we discussed, today is the review of the proposed 2019 rate-supported operating budget is the first review or first budget prepared for Norfolk County. The schedule is somewhat a little bit different than prior years. In the past, we had presented the capital plan in October, the rate budget in November, and the Board of Health and levy-supported operating budgets in January. However, as a result of the elections, the rate and the capital budgets have been moved to January. As mentioned before, tomorrow we'll be reviewing the capital budget after the rate, and definitely if more dates need to be sent to be scheduled to finish off the reviews, they'll definitely be rescheduled as needed by council. So again, throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please please ask them at the time. So we talked about the water and wastewater. Norfolk County is responsible for the purification and distribution of potable water to all water users within Norfolk County. It includes the costs for maintenance, capital items, and operating costs. For all the filtration plants that James had mentioned, there's, I believe he mentioned 7 different ones within Norfolk County. Norfolk County is also responsible for the collection and treatment of wastewater or sewage. The other wording that we use is, sanitary sewage, sorry. That's the other, you may hear us refer to it by that name. Again, it's all the costs related to capital, operating, and maintenance of all the filtration or collection systems and treatment systems are included in this budget. James also mentioned that this area is highly regulated. There's a lot of quality, quantity, and environmental standards that need to be met, mainly as a result of the Walkerton incident. The other thing is for the capital, James also mentioned that it is 100% funded from the rate users. There's no tax dollars that are levied to actually fund the rate-supported budget. The revenue is we receive revenue from direct billings for consumption of water and wastewater and from user fees. And the user fees are items such as turn-offs, turn-ons, connection permits, that type of thing. So the next slide just is a summary of the proposed 2018 budget at a high level compared to the 2018 approved budget. The first item, the operating costs, there's a total increase of $148,200. Mainly in the operating costs included are salaries and benefits, materials and supplies and services. The next area, based on PSAB regulations, we have to record amortization costs. You'll note that there's a large increase of almost 500,000. That generally relates to new capital or replacement of our infrastructure over the years that we now are amortizing. So as projects are finished and infrastructure replaced or new infrastructure produced or acquired, the amortization costs will increase. The next area, the long-term debt, or the interest on the long-term debt, is a small decrease of 26,200. That's related to, included in our budget for the rate budget, are projected debt that we'll be issuing for projects that we are expected to complete in 2019. There's actually a reduction because there's an offset of some debt that we have repaid for a net impact of 26,200. The next larger area is the non-rate revenue. This includes the user fees I was just referring to. They're actually located on page 4.3 to page 4.6. And staff for this year have did a thorough review and calculated the 100% recovery costs of all of the user fees for water and wastewater. You'll note when you review the appendix, there is a lot of fees that have increased, a lot of fees have decreased, and staff have provided a reason why there has been such a drastic change in any of those fees. Overall, for the user fees themselves, there's the impact is just over $22,600. You'll notice when we look at drivers, it's a little less than that because the occurrences have been decreased in this budget. Yeah, based on the change, based on the 100% recovery review. Also included in the non-rate revenue is a recovery from the levy budget for fire protection services. And I believe that's approximately 1.9 million. Also included in this budget is a council-approved initiative of $250,000, which was approved in 2018 and relates to the overall responsibility officer. You'll see that included as a separate item when you review the document. Also included in 2019 is a request for council to approve a new budget initiative for $35,000, which is an item related to rate models for the water and wastewater distribution systems, treatment and collection systems. Again, when we're going through the budget document, Public Works staff can explain more of the need and the justification for the request. And overall, within the budget, we actually have a reduction in the financing, which includes your debt financing, transfers to and from your reserves. And this year, there's a natural reduction because last year we included a $200,000 transfer from the wastewater reserve to fund a project. We no longer need that transfer into the capital budget or into the operating budget to finance this capital item. Now, if we look at the actual, that's just at a very high level. If we look at the actual details of what's driving the actual increase, the total increase is $520,300, or 2.9% increase. There are some areas which we consider controllable and uncontrollable. The first area that we'll talk about is the uncontrollable budget drivers. The main one is the increase in the salary and benefits. The majority of the increase is based on negotiated contracts. No, you can, any time is good, yeah.
What portion of these salaries and benefits is overtime, specifically for the weekend records? For the fire levels, different plans. My understanding that every Saturday and every Sunday we're paying overtime.
Myself, I don't have that detail, but we can get you that detail.
Madam Mayor, if I drill into the budget, our overtime proposed for 2019 amounts to $325,900, and that would be for all weekends, after-hour call-outs, sewer, water main breaks, and the like. I'd look to my math expert over there, 325 over 2.36 million.
A bunch of accountants here without a calculator.
– 13.5%, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, 13.
Through Mayor Chop, Councillor, included in the salaries and benefits portion of the budget, we are proposing a figure of $325,900. That would be for overtime up and above the usual 40-hour per week that our staff would be working, and that would cover weekend as well as emergency call-outs, water main breaks, sewer breaks, and alarm response.
So I have a couple numbers in front of me as well. Historically, 2015, I believe that number was somewhere around 287,000 for overtime, and in 2016 it was around 275,000 for overtime, and now we're up to 325,900. I'm just wondering, Mr. Barrett, if you could sort of explain to us what's being done to reduce some of that overtime.
Sure. Through you. Those costs relate directly to negotiated salaries and benefits. So there's a nominal increase each year that's been negotiated. But one of the things that we build in, we know what weekend rounds cost, so we budget for those. We're required to be on call. We do have a rotational pager. But the one area that we really don't have a lot of control over relates to emergency call-outs and alarms. So those could be storms, electricals that would trigger some of our SCADA systems at the water and sewer plants. On page 3-1 of the budget document, we show, as an example, a number of water main breaks. In 2016, we had 12, and these tend to never break during the day, it seems. It increased to 20, and this year, as of the end of September, we were at 25, and I know we've had a number of them, including one on Christmas Eve, that requires staff to go out. So that's an indicator of, again, aging infrastructure. Things are continually sliding in terms of their functionality. So that's an area where we need to ensure that we're keeping up with infrastructure upgrades and repairs and replacements. So it's really hard to anticipate that. Obviously, cold winters, we're going to have more water main breaks. So those are some areas that are uncontrollable, and it's difficult to do a year-to-year comparison.
I appreciate the uncontrollable factors. It's the controllable factors with the weekend rounds that happen every Saturday and every Sunday, 52 weeks a year. That's more my concern right now. Are you aware, obviously you have a copy of the Water and Wastewater Service Delivery Review Report that was done in July 2017, and it was updated in February 2018. Councilor Martin, do you have an extra copy you might be able to give?
I don't have that with me, Mayor Chop, but if one can be made available, that would be fine. And again, these weekend rates, the call-out, thank you, Councillor. These are negotiated in collective agreements. They form part of letters of understanding between the employer and the employee. Perhaps Mr. Sluchenkov may comment on those, but they are definitely defined in terms of after hours, what the procedures and call-out and process is.
So, is it, what you're telling me then is the overtime on the weekends is a contractually guaranteed component of the contract? Is that what I'm led to believe? Or that there is just an overtime rate if they are invited to do overtime work that was paid?
So I don't, to you, Ms. Mayor, I don't have the collective right in front of me, but depending on when the members are being called in and when the work is being performed, there would be associated overtime calculations, so could be provisions surrounding that.
So I'm just going to cut to the chase right at the beginning. My problem right now is we have some of the highest water and waste rates in the province, arguably, and we have a report that was done by a county employee, Robert Walton, in July of 2017, and it was updated in February of 2018. It's quite possibly the most recent report that we have. And I, for one, think he did a fantastic job. The savings that are articulated in this report that should have formed part of the negotiations are extraordinary. So I would be curious to see in the contract whether or not, this is but one component of this, whether or not that was taken into account, whether we have the flexibility. According to Mr. Walton, and weekend rounds are not specifically mandated in the Ontario Regulation 170-03, that as a result of the advancement in water technologies, that in fact, if there's any levels that are out of play in the water treatment facility, the equipment automatically shuts down. Somebody would be alerted and then they would be brought in on a call. But that the daily testing that has historically been done by Norfolk County as a result of the advancement in the technologies is in fact not necessary, nor is it regulated or mandated rather by the government. So that's just one area, the kind of the area that jumps out for me in the salaries benefit component. I find 13.5% quite high for overtime to actually be factored in right off the get-go.
Okay, I'm not sure what the
Councillor Huffman, go
procedure
ahead.
is here, so I concur. To me, I've always been a little confused that when there is a part of a position that if it does require every weekend, why that is overtime. That to me, that if that's something that there's 7 days a week, then there's a position that includes weekends. It's not an overtime thing. So I absolutely agree with you there. And if we're, I mean, obviously, water regulation is a sensitive issue, but I don't think we need to be incurring costs that aren't even regulated, that we don't even need to adhere to. So.
Thank you, I agree. The frustration for me is that we just negotiated a new agreement, and this incredible report is not mentioned once in the budget, despite consultant reports from 2015 in relation to holding tanks, and yet we have massive savings that are being presented to us that I don't feel have been accounted for. So I don't mean to be so hard on you out of the gate, but that's just...
I'm going to be a little bit hard back, if that's okay. There is I mentioned this appendix earlier. I'm just overly cautious. It's been mentioned a few times that we have the highest rates in Ontario. That is just simply not the fact. If you go to that appendix at the end, there's actually 3 municipalities that are very close to us that have higher rates than Norfolk County. And I don't want any misconceptions out there. I'm not saying we have low rates.
To be clear, I said some of the highest.
Okay,
I didn't say the highest.
fair,
I said
yes.
some of the highest, and I have looked at neighboring municipalities, some that are lower. In fact, I could say that I've even seen some that have decreased their rates in the last 2 years. So,
Correct. Yes.
some of the highest, not the
just
highest.
I didn't mean you directly. I've heard it from others as well, and I'm not disagreeing that the rates are high, and there's reasons for that, as we pointed out. But I don't want anyone to think that we have one of the highest rates in Ontario. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Okay, to carry on, I had mentioned earlier in the previous screen that for the reasons that the projected long-term debt payments and interest are reducing is basically there's some debt that has fallen off our books, and it's also offset. That debt that's fallen off has been offset by projected debt that we'll be issuing. There's $22,000 for an increase in the billing contract. That's with our current provider. The increase in the SCADA contract for 2019 is projected to be $30,000. We've also had an increase in our...
Thanks. Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Cribbs. I'm joined here this afternoon by Stephanie Davis. Stephanie is our Acting Director of Environmental Services, and she is also a fully licensed, one of our most highly qualified operators. So she knows, she's worked from the ground up along with her colleagues in the department. Stephanie, would you like to comment on SCADA and how it is used for managing our water wastewater systems?
Yeah, so our SCADA system, we have a provider for that. And what it does is it monitors throughout various programming and interfaces the actions that happen in all of our water and wastewater treatment plants. They are fully alarmed through this SCADA system. It tracks and ensures compliance for us with all the regulatory requirements. And as you did point out yourself, Mayor, it does alarm and help us shut down things so that we can respond appropriately when needed. Yep.
Through the mayor, just asking Stephanie, maybe Stephanie can, because I cannot remember myself, what SCADA does stand for, the acronym.
Yeah, it's supervisory control and data acquisition.
I could just, Stephanie, one more question. How many years have we had that in place? Is that something that's been?
I've been with the county for almost 14, and it was here before
always
I
been there.
began.
Okay.
So I'm going to say roughly 16 to 20 years at least.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
To carry on, we do have an increase of just over $30,000 for increase in property taxes related to the Port Rowan wastewater treatment plant. Impact reassessed this property, and this is the results of the impact.
So sorry to trouble you again. In terms of an impact assessment in property taxes, I didn't realize we paid property taxes on our properties. How does that work?
To Mayor Chop, certain properties that a municipality owns can be taxable, one of which are water and sewer treatment plants.
Don't we get the property taxes?
We do. This budget charges it to the operating receives it. So we do pay ourselves property taxes. It is assessable by MPAC, and that is a result of the new and improved Port Rowan treatment plant. That's why the higher assessment came in recently.
So for our other facilities, okay, that's just the increase. Okay, thanks.
Maybe to clarify that a little bit, so we are charging the rate side of the house budget. We're charging for the wastewater treatment plants. We're charging the property taxes, and the operating budget recovers those dollars, so that they are being funded by the rate users, the property taxes.
I have some questions still about that, but I'll let you carry through the rest of it, and we'll come back to it.
The next item is the wastewater contract. The wastewater treatment plants are contracted out to Veolia, and the estimated increase for 2019 is approximately $41,000. Some areas that are a little bit more controllable, generally in each budget you'll see some capital requirements. There will be some items from the capital budget that we have no funding source for the items, so we have to either collect it from the actual rates. Last year it was much higher, so this year you're seeing a decrease in those capital requirements that have to be funded from rates of approximately $137,000. That's being offset by an increase that's included in the rate budget this year to fund capital projects. We did do a detailed comprehensive reserve and reserve fund review in 2017. And one of the recommendations was in order to get our reserves and reserve funds in a surplus balance as opposed to the negative balance that some of them are in. And we've reviewed the requirements based on the capital plan. We need to increase the reserve contribution to the capital replacement reserve fund for wastewater by $200,000. So for over the next 10 years, we'll be in a surplus position as opposed to a deficit position within that reserve fund. There's also overall increase in one-time maintenance and repair items and supplies of $95,000. Increase in write-offs. The majority of the write-offs are from tenants, almost $30,000. And we've removed the one-time reserve fund contribution to offset consumption deficiency or issue that we had with bulk water. The council, through our budget process last year, subsidized a portion of the increase that we would need. So that's being removed this year. That's a good question. If we go through a few more slides, we'll be talking about that. Okay, great. And on the revenue side, overall, there's included an increase of 33,500. One of the main drivers of that is an increase from the fire protection services. The rate, it's similar to the taxes. The rate budget charges the levy budget for fire protection services for the fire hydrants, et cetera, for having being the maintenance and the installation of being able to supply water for fire protection services. And again, the council-approved initiative of $250,000 for the overall responsibility officer based on the previous report approved, and new budget initiative $35,000. And overall, just a lot of adjustments, because while staff are reviewing this budget, they've gone through all the line items and they've looked at the history of their expenses. They've projected any increases, et cetera, in contracts, any increase in volume of services that they have to include in the budget, and the net miscellaneous changes add up to a net amount of decrease of $12,800. For an overall change from last year, an increase in the 2019 budget of $520,300 or 2.9%.
Madam Clerk, we cannot
My
hear the mayor
apologies.
speak.
Council gave staff a mandate at the, I believe it was the December 11th meeting, December the 8th? December the 8th, to negotiate with CUPE in terms of this ORO operator position, and we agreed to extend that contract only on a one-month basis to the end of January. So I'm curious if you could provide council at this time with an update as to where those negotiations stand. $250,000 for me is a significant line item. When we're talking about an increase of $500,000, that's 50% that perhaps shouldn't be there.
I'm not to Ms. Mayor, I'm not an expert in the Municipal Act, but I don't believe that I can, in the public, discuss things that pertain to labor relations and negotiations with the bargaining unit.
Okay, well, we can move into closed session at some point to discuss the status of that then before the conclusion of the budgets. Go ahead.
There may be a way to simply split the difference. It really just depends on how much specificity council desires or you require in answer to your question. As a broad proposition, that $250,000 figure is in there because that's what it would cost to extend the current contract to the end of the year. The starting proposition is we have no choice but to provide ORO services. Law is clear, and that is the cost for the default system. This council has to pass some placeholder number. We have instructions to seek alternative methods of providing that service. We are attempting to comply with those instructions. The number cannot be zero, because it's something that has to be done. And the worst case scenario is $250,000 if we are unable to comply with your instructions.
So my question actually was just simple. I just wondered have we begun those discussions? Because I am concerned that perhaps we haven't really begun those discussions, and council did issue a directive back in December to start negotiations. So I'm just wondering whether or not we did or didn't start them.
Staff, as directed by council, have engaged in conversations with the bargaining unit's president.
Okay, so perhaps, again, we'll move into closed session afterwards and get an update on where that stands, because my concerns remain that perhaps we're not as far along in that as we should have been.
If I may, if we just change the questioning around a little, I think that Mr. Baird could probably provide an analysis of a number that would offer council some savings, but also respect the fact that the costs are not zero, and there does need to be a figure in there, and that might satisfy the respective needs in a more expeditious manner.
So I'm just, I guess also, Mr. Baird, then I'll direct it to you. So my understanding, I've spent a bit of time now reading through the KP agreement, and I see that we have an emergency pager protocol for one that runs through the evenings. And that prior to the ORO position being contracted out, it was being done in-house by managers. Bob Fields, I believe, was holding that position at one point in time. Stephanie, I'm not sure if you did or not. And so, we do have a number of managers that are capable of holding that position during the day, which shouldn't increase then, since they're a salaried employee. In my view, it shouldn't, by holding, from all the research that I've done, the only time you're ever getting a phone call under this ORO position is if something happens. All of a sudden the water is purple and the person doesn't know what to do, and so they call the ORO and the next steps are taken. So it would be nothing for that manager to hold that position during the day. And we already have Norfolk County employees on an overnight pager system for emergency response. So this would seem like there would be a significant reduction in that figure from the $250,000 from what's currently being contracted out.
Okay, so if I can just, there are a number of good questions in there, Madam Mayor. So up until September of 2018, there were two management staff, one Mr. Fields, who is off at the present time, and Ms. Davis. They are the only two management staff that are qualified to be ORO. They had been taking turns 24/7 for a considerable amount of time last year doing that. You are correct. Monday to Friday from 8 o'clock or 7:30 to 4 p.m. Stephanie is the only management individual that acts as ORO, and she does just that. We do have individuals after hours and weekends if there's emergency call-outs, and I'm going to let her just explain their role versus that of an ORO.
Can I just interrupt with one quick question there? Sorry. So I didn't realize that. So the $25,000 contract is just for nights and weekends? It's not even, you're having to hold that during the daytime?
No, to you, Mayor. Actually, Aqua is holding it through the daytime and at night currently.
Okay, sorry. 'Cause I thought that's,
Since it was passed last year for
Okay.
them to do it for.
that was my understanding
Yeah.
as well, that they
Yeah.
held it 24/7. I just thought what you just said,
Yeah, no,
Mr.
I'm sorry,
Baird.
just to clarify, because Stephanie's role, there's only her and a manager that direct the work of 36 operators that do our water, wastewater systems. So she's got her day job to do as well.
Well, I'm by no means suggesting that somebody hold I've lived on call on a pager when I used to fly medevac airplanes, and I'm not suggesting that anybody be on a pager 24/7. But again, it was a component that was even in that water and wastewater service delivery review that was updated as far back as 2018, and it was also part of the bargaining mandate when we went to the table with QP. So this is a little bit my frustration right now in that we're seeing a $250,000 line item, and what I would have hoped was we would have had some sort of report back on progress that had been made in that regard before approving this budget, given that that makes up 50% of the increase.
Madam Mayor, this budget's been worked on since August, when we only had two management staff doing that ORO duty 24/7. We were fortunate to have the former council support a short-term contract with Aqua to provide those services so that Ms. Davis and Mr. Fields could resume their day job and not be dependent upon so much. But nonetheless,
I understand, but you just said it, a short-term contract, but we're not talking short-term when we have a $250,000 line item. That's no longer short-term, that's long-term.
no, that's correct. Now, again, when these budgets were prepared, there was no indication whether they were going to enter into a long-term contract with a third party, such as Aqua, or whether there's an alternative option, as you've outlined, that may be more affordable. But at the time this document was put together, as Mr. Cribbs has said, this is sort of the upset worst-case scenario. Council has made it clear to staff in December that you would like to investigate alternative service delivery options, which we are doing so, as Mr. Slichenkov has indicated.
You just said in August, however, that Stephanie and Bob Fields were the OROs. So if this was started in August, and the argument is that this was prepared in August, and so we can't do anything about the line because that was in there way back when, it actually wasn't in there way back when. The contract for the ORO with Aqua started in November and December. So that line had to have been added sometime after November, not back in August, but just to be clear.
Mr. Baird, the proceedings might benefit from your analysis on what lesser figure could work, given where we currently stand.
Madam Mayor and Council, we are of the opinion that if you were to reduce the $250,000 as shown in the draft budget by $50,000 at this point, it would be a step in the right direction. I would put that forward for consideration. You're certainly entitled to offer up an alternative figure, but as Mr. Cribbs has mentioned, we do have a duty to provide that service, be it in-house or through contract.
Okay, sorry, we'll come back. Well, it's there. And I guess we'll touch on the new council, new budget initiatives, the $35,000. This is something else, I'm not sure who would be the best to explain this, but the way that I read it, this is a tool for developers. So I understand that, we have this full cost recovery for water and waste fees, but how is it that a tool that's being used for developers is coming at the expense of people using our water and waste services? Even myself, on my water bill, I don't feel comfortable because somebody's building a subdivision and they need this tool and that encourages development, and yet that's being tacked on to my bill. That may very well be a tool that benefits the county, but I'm not sure that this is the right spot for that to be.
Madam Mayor, I'll just read the detail on this. This is not necessarily developer-driven, and I appreciate you bringing that up because development should pay for development. This is to develop a program to implement trenchless technologies. You may be familiar with a process that involves pipe relining. Instead of excavating old pipe, they actually can insert a sleeve and burst the pipe or reline a pipe to avoid excavation. So on those roadways that may be not due for another 10 or 15 years in terms of a full rehabilitation, we can use this trenchless technologies as the broader term. So the purpose of this new budget initiative of $35,000 is to do just that, to develop a program to identify which sections of our infrastructure could benefit from this trenchless or in situ work to avoid, a much more costly conventional trench and replace and reinstate.
So if I could just read for everybody in the Norfolk County proposed 2019 new budget initiative, the justification as I read it is the following. Water distribution and wastewater collection computer models for each of the 5 urban areas were completed as part of the Integrated Sustainable Master Plan. As the communities grow, subdivisions, change land uses, reconstruction, enhancement of existing systems, the models must be updated to reflect any changes to the pipe systems, and I don't even know how to pronounce that word. This will be an annual budget need. The proposed value is an estimate based on discussions with the ISMP consultant. The actual needs will be assessed in 2018. The annual cost will be refined in 2019 and subsequent budget years. We offer the use of the models to developers to assist in the design of the internal water and wastewater systems. The county does the final official model updates once the systems are constructed. Staff feels that this is an added value to the development community. The county has also been offering, charged back to the developer at our cost, to have the county run the model to assist the developers in their submission. So do you have an amount that I'm assuming it forms part of the user fees, although I read through the user fees and I didn't see that as a user fee on there. Would we have an amount that's been charged back to these developers?